Welcome back to ID Fitness Podcast. Today we have incredible guest, Dr. Josie Nicholson. For 13 years, Josie served as the Director of Sports Psychology and Assistant AD at Ole Miss, helping athletes and coaches navigate not just the pressure of competition, but the bigger picture of mental health and performance. Her own journey has been shaped by playing soccer at a high level, overcoming injury, even spending time overseas where she first discovered the field of sports psychology. That passion eventually led her to her private practice, where she now works with athletes, coaches, and leaders of all kinds. And if that wasn't enough, Josie also was a host of a podcast called Unit 3D that hit over 300 episodes, sharing stories that remind us that athletes are more than just a number on a scoreboard. In today's episode, we're diving into her story, the culture shift she witnessed in sports, and how we can all learn to perform better by taking care of our whole selves. This is going to be a powerful conversation, so let's get into it. Josie, it was so good to have you on the ID Fitness Podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Now, you just started your own practice, which I'm actually really excited to hear about because you transferred from the University of Mississippi to private practice.
Yeah.
What happened with that?
So nothing negative at all.
Yeah.
In fact, all positive. So I was with I was the Director of Sports Psychology, Assistant AD at Ole Miss Athletics for 13 years. And, the landscape of college athletics is changing, and I've got two young kids, 7 and 9, which means that my other job is full-time chauffeur. And it just seemed like time to bring in somebody younger, somebody I'd been doing it a while, wanted the program to evolve in a way that kind of met college athletics where it will be. And I've always had a private practice on the side, just 1 or 2 people.
Yeah.
And mainly the reason is that I wanted to be able to walk into a meeting and have a plan B. Like, I'm going to say what I need to say. I'm going to believe, stand by my beliefs and convictions. And if it costs me my job, I know exactly what I'm doing. And I never did, because Ole Miss is a pretty great place to work. But I was able to move in pretty seamlessly. So
Now, you went 13 years at Ole Miss, and with going through 13 years at Ole Miss, did you feel like your direction or passion has kind of changed as you innovated and going through that? You started to get like more your niche, per se?
I think so, because it was very much, when I started doing it, there weren't a lot of people doing it.
Mm-mm.
There were, a handful of people in athletic departments. We were the first in the SEC. So it was really trying to figure out, what does this look like? And the stigma was so great at that time that it was really about, how do we get the message to athletes that their mental health is important, which clearly now is, top priority for this generation. And how do we get coaches to understand a new way of coaching that's, doesn't get them fired, and things like that. So it was really, I think the needs changed as the culture changed, and that allowed me to get deeper into places I am passionate about. And, people started acknowledging me in the halls and like not being weirded out when I was at a function, like, oh, that's the sports psych, she's analyzing me. I'm like, well, I mean, if you've got money, yeah. Yeah. So the culture shifted so dramatically over the years that I was able to explore more of my interests and more of the needs of the athletes.
So did you feel like when you first started, there was just like this negative stigma?
Yes.
Like, I don't know anything about this. So you kind of go down, like, give us a picture what that looks like, because some people don't know that.
Yeah. So the first part, and this was across the country, none of this is unique to Ole Miss, none of it, because I'm very tight with people from other universities, and we talk about it. It's all the same. It was very, I say misogynistic. It was just a male dominated, and the idea of having a female in athletics, whether it's an athlete or a staff, was, well, you got to be more masculine. You have to kind of, fight to be what the men are. And that's not the case now. The other thing is that there was a huge fear from coaches that I was going to make their athletes soft, that I was going to teach them to feel and they wouldn't be able to perform anymore. And I think over the years, not by my doing, but like a combination of just where we've gone with mental health and where we've gone with performance psychology, we were able to recognize that no, the more of yourself you can bring to the field, the more whole you can make yourself off the field to bring that wholeness onto the field, the better your performance is going to be. So that's been a radical shift, because it was really like, and I mean, really honestly, coaches were like, I don't want her making my athletes soft.
Wow.
You know, I'm like, well, your athletes are soft, you know, like when you can't be vulnerable, it's pretty soft.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And yeah, it's so interesting. When did you feel like the gap started to bridge? Not obviously just directed towards Ole Miss, but obviously that's where you were working, but just from your colleagues, the people you've talked to, when did you feel like, you know, you're 13 years in, when did you feel like it started to bridge, like, oh no, this stuff actually works?
Yeah. I think early on at Ole Miss, you know, in short pockets. And then there'd be like a coaching change, and it would kind of be on. But I noticed that quicker and quicker when coaches changed, they would get on board, you know, like I might have had a uphill battle with one coach, and then they leave, and the next coach, it's like not as steep a battle. And then really, I know that the intersection of performance and mental health was gaining speed pretty early on, maybe 3-4 years in. And I became seen as a dual resource, like mental health, but she could also help you in performance enhancement. 2020 came along, and there was a whole lot that went down. I don't know if you remember.
COVID.
It was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
COVID and social justice issues, and
I totally forgot about
highlight on inequities and things like that. And it felt like this generation of athletes were standing up and saying, we are more than athletes, and you will treat us such now. You know, it felt like a real, we're not going to be numbers. We're not going to be, you know, tools for your success and things like that. And maybe not explicitly, but it really felt like that to me. And huge destigmatization had to happen, because everybody's mental health went in the shitter. Like it was, you know, it was not a kind time to anyone. So, so it was really became, it's not just a dual resource, it's a resource that's holistic. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So addressing all of it does make a difference. And honestly, too, you know, we kind of like to separate football from the rest of athletics, which is understandable and necessary, because, you know, it's hard to financially keep a department running on Olympic sports alone, right? So they're not selling out season tickets for golf,
Right.
you know, even though they should. Our golf teams are really, really
Yeah.
good. But, you know, when Lane came on, there was such a shift, because he is such a supporter for mental health, and he has grown so much in that area as well. So he was very quickly like, we need you, the guys need you, and they need you because for things that I can't provide, that our coaches can't provide, but you need to be seen as part of the team. And so, and once you get football, I mean, for better or worse, once you get football on board, the rest of the department's like, oh, if it's okay for football, it's okay for us, you know, because I think there's an unspoken, everybody's trying to live up to football, or, you know, yeah.
It's so interesting. And it's so, like, obviously football plays a huge role, but it's like, especially of where me and you are at in the South.
Yes.
So it's like
Religion.
SEC football is like the king of kings. Like I had no idea how big it was, because I'm from Chicago.
Yeah.
And so I had no idea how big it was until I moved here.
Church on Saturday and Sunday.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, how do you, and this just made me think about this. I'm thinking about the players the whole time, but I didn't even think about the coaches. Did the coaches ever come talk to you? Did that gap ever bridge a little bit like, hey, I need help?
Yes. So, because of my role, I was sheerly a consultant. So making sure that I kept that boundary. And when it got to a place where it's like, this is personal and, here's how it can benefit you, and giving them a referral. And so, I mean, a huge increase, especially after 2020 in staff and coaches taking those referrals and actually doing it, which was awesome. And I think the consultant piece, like being able to sit down, it adds a layer of safety. Like it's almost like, let me talk to you about a friend. I have this friend but it's like, for the sake of my athletes, what should I do about this or how, and so it provided that safety where they're not coming for themselves. But then also, they were able to talk about some stuff in a safe place with somebody they knew that made it more clear to them how it was going to help for them to talk to a stranger in a pretty, what would be considered a threatening environment, which is just one-on-one intimacy, we're going to be vulnerable kind of way. So
now, when you mean by referral, did you like refer them out to somebody else?
Yes.
Okay. And then kind of tell that process, because I think that's an important process to kind of have that boundary, because you have people who are going to listen to the podcast who want to go in the psychology field and they're trying to develop those, when do I refer out? Do I refer out? Like is, after all the experience you've had, how do you do it?
So, this, but there's, when we think of sports psychology, there's two different lanes. You can get a degree in performance psychology, and that's just the mental side of the game. And there's no clinical training in that, and there's no like counseling and things like that. So anytime it gets to a clinical threshold, like it's a mental health issue, it's impacting their daily life. They're talking about anxiety, and it's not just before games, it's before tests, or it's before, when it gets more to personal and daily life, then it's ethically, they need to refer to a licensed mental health clinician. And it's usually when it becomes much more about who they are, not what they're doing.
And that's a good differentiator. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And then, which is hard. It's so hard because all the athletic endeavors are a huge part of who they are, so you have to really, and then there's sports psychologists who are licensed mental health professionals at the doctoral level that are also trained in performance enhancement. And then there's also sports psychology, like mental health specialists who are not necessarily at the doctoral level, but are mental health professionals trained in working with athletes and the mental side of the game.
Yeah.
So they can kind of address all the spectrums. So we have like significant mental health struggles to thriving optimally in your performance in daily life. And so somebody that is dually trained with the license and the sport performance training can address all sides of that spectrum. And somebody that is has the mental side of the game addresses the from we're doing all right personally and mental health wise to optimally thriving, and do a great job. And that's really important. But I think it's also very important to know when it drops down. And that can be a tough call. I often tell people that are training in the field, like, you have to be way better at boundaries than any typical clinician, because there's so much overlap. And I was given a talk to psychologists that are not in the sports psych realm, and I was like, I mean, how many of y'all travel with your clients? Like, how many of y'all are showing up at your clients' games or, seeing them daily in the hallway? And you just have to be better at keeping boundaries.
I didn't even think about that too. Just traveling with the team, doing this, getting to know them. Like, you're building a pretty solid, strong relationships, not only in just in private, but also you're starting to see patterns in their outside life that you can, since you're close with them, you can address those patterns in the consult room. Like, hey, I've noticed when you do this, it has effect not only on your teammates, but this as well.
Yeah.
Would that be right to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that happens. I mean, I usually, my style is, they bring it up, or I might point it out, like, hey, I noticed you saw me and ran away. What's that about? Kind of thing. So yeah.
Now, are you in a lane where you do both?
Yes.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah. So
And so
yeah.
I'm glad that you said that, because one of the things I wanted to ask you is since you're in the lane of both,
Mhm.
and if somebody's going to pursue that career and they're going to be in the lane of both, let's say they work at a university setting, what type of boundaries did you put up? When did you refer out personally?
So anytime my availability or resources were not enough to meet the need of the client, if they need to be seen more than once a week, I probably didn't have the bandwidth, especially when it was just me. Now, by the time I left, it was a pretty fleshed out staff, right? But it was just me. It was like, all right, I'm not going to be able to give this client what they need. Anytime there was, trying to think. I was going to say crisis mode, but we did a good bit of crisis. So,
Yeah.
but it was always an opportunity to have like those boundaries. Like, unless it's an emergency, then I don't respond to texts, or I don't do therapy over text, or we can discuss that when you come in, that sort of thing. And because a lot of times with athletes, they've had really close relationships with coaches through high school. And then they come to college and they just expect that's kind of when people care about you, this is what they do. They're also shocked that, oh, they're not the same. This is not the same relationship as my high school coach who had me over for dinner and all those kind, was involved in my family and all that kind of stuff. So, so boundaries I think are really helpful to establish across the board in athletics. So,
It's so interesting you say that, because a lot of people struggle with that, even like just, I think,
oh,
in daily life and
daily
career.
life, yeah.
But it's like, so let's say you have a client that walks in and they're like frustrated that you didn't respond back, and they already know that you've put these boundaries up. Like, how do you coach them through that process to be like, listen, like, this is a new stage now.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we operate. This is how, when a university is bigger, it's less relational to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think it's actually not less relational; it's differently relational, if that makes sense.
yep.
Because it's still very relational, but I think that having those conversations first about the coaches, like, yeah, what is it like? Like, you're seeing the business side of this, because I think most of them know it intellectually, but we all know that doesn't necessarily help your big feelings. And so having like talking through those feelings, like, and just validating them oftentimes allows them to see it differently. And I think it's a super important process, because they're not going to be besties with their boss. And I think a lot of athletes will go right into jobs and be like, oh, they don't care about me as a person. This job, and depersonalize the process and everything. And it's a struggle that way. So being able to, have your college coach as a transition, I think is really good. And then from my vantage point, to be like, well, let's talk about expectations and how did it feel, and how can we talk through this with our relationship so that people in your life can have boundaries and it not impact how much you think they care about you, you know?
That's well said.
And a lot of times it is, people grow up with families with different boundaries. And I know this is shocking. I'm glad you're sitting down. Gen X, so older. And we had very different relationships. I mean, generally speaking, obviously there's, exceptions, but very different relationships with our parents. And so it was a huge adjustment for me to sit with athletes who are telling their parents everything. They're like, man, how am I going to tell my parents? And I think, do you have to? Like, is that let's just deal with what's happening before we cross that bridge. But so that's really interesting. So there's just different boundaries in different families and different generations. So coaches that are my age are having different like they have different ideas around boundaries, and navigate that maybe not easily or more difficultly, but differently than, much younger coaches. And so boundaries become a huge part of the conversation.
Yeah, because I told you this, that I listened to this podcast with this sports psychologist. he does mostly, he does mostly all professional athletes, but he has like a group of motocross athletes, dirt bike racers. And he says that based off his experience, like, I don't know if you thought about this, relationships with your family, boundaries and how you're raised, and also your intimate relationships play a massive role on your mental health and your performance. Like, would you think, like, how would you capitalize on that statement?
Yeah.
Or what would you say?
I mean, we know from research that that's true. You look at outcome measures, you look at wellness, you look at depression, anxiety, going through trauma, like perceived social support, which is interesting because it's not necessarily social support, it's perceived social support, is often the game changer that makes for a better outcome than somebody else, you know, in a similar situation, right? So yeah, I mean, that's huge. And it's just like little things like, does it impact you negatively if your parents can't come to your event, you know? And I could say for me, like, no, it was like that was just a different time, it was different expectations. And so looking at expectations of people and how boundaries that have to be in place impact those expectations and the relationship and everything. And so, yeah, I think that it's huge on mental health in general.
Yeah.
And mental health is really big on your performance. So
I know, I was thinking about this too. It's just like when I was an athlete, most of the time in high school, like if I had a girlfriend and we didn't work out, it destroyed my performance.
yeah.
And obviously ties in like, what type of boundaries did you have with that person?
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys cross boundaries you shouldn't have and maybe should have waited to marriage? Like, what does that look like? I think that's so interesting that we think that that's not going to affect us. Like, oh,
Right.
we'll still perform.
Yeah.
Like, so how did you walk through some of these? I mean, because you probably see it, tons of heartbreaks and kind of walking them through is like, well, because in Sports Center or whatever they're going through, they're just getting hammered. This person's not performing, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they have no idea. It's like they lost their dad. This happened, you know, their best friend got shot and killed. And like, they don't see that side.
Right. You know, it's really interesting because that's one of the things in the past couple of years that's shifted. It was not uncommon for me to put a moratorium. And I say that like I ran their life. It's not like that. I would suggest that it would be helpful if you did not look at social media and especially the comments. So if you need to tweet something out, you tweet it and you get off. Like you don't read the comments because it's people who are not responding to you as a human. You know, they're responding to you as a, you know, entertainment piece or, you know, this two-dimensional person. And then also teaching skills of compartmentalization, which we all need, and knowing that that only goes so far, you know, that you can only keep that up for so long. It only, you know, there's dangers for landmines and triggers and all that kind of stuff in there. And so talking through like how far can this go and can you have this compartmentalized while you're really processing and dealing with it over here. And a lot of times it's really, you know, like for example, if I'm working with a client that has a trauma that they're working through, I may not go to that client's practice. Even though it was pretty regular for me to show up at practice, I don't want to put a reminder in front of them when they need to be compartmentalizing. So, so it's things like that. And also just saying it's okay for you to be human, you know? And over the years, like especially early on, helping coaches understand, like, are you approachable as a coach for somebody to come to you and say, I can't do it today. This has happened. And it's very, very rare that an athlete would do that. But sometimes necessary. You know, I'm like the anniversary of a parent's death. I'm, you know, going to be worthless in practice. Not really. But some people, it's just a heavy thing and they'll be distracted. And so, you know, saying, can I take a step away for the day, which has been a big, huge topic of conversation with mental health days and stuff. But are you approachable? Are you open to that conversation even if you come down on the side of, no, you can't miss practice, can you have that conversation and talk to the athlete about why, And so it becomes really important. I kind of lost track of the question, but
No, I like that.
yeah.
I kind of want to go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because, me and you are all about rabbit holes.
All rabbit holes.
Because it's so interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I'm fascinated with injuries, very similar to you. And so that's one of the reasons why I got in the strength conditioning field, was because I wanted to train athletes so that way they can stay injury free as much as possible and be healthy. I'm less concerned about their strength numbers and more concerned about their performance numbers on the field or whatever they're trying to perform. And so, like, I had an example today. I had a client come in today and she tried to deadlift and she was just exhausted. And then she went over there and tried to do the curls, and she couldn't even do the curls like she normally would. You can tell her brain is fried. And so I was just like, she's like, I just want to stretch today. I was like, how about we just do some breathing exercises that we can do that just you can relax.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge advocate. I mean, you know this because you are too, but like the breathing stuff. And so I always let people just relax. I'll put them in positions where they can fill up their lower back and just chill, get them out of fight or flight. And it's so interesting that you say that, because if you're not approachable as a coach or even a parent or just in anybody in general, and people can't express themselves, you're not making them harder. You're making them softer.
You're making them hide.
Mm.
Yeah. And hiding is a form of, I say, softness.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
Like when you can't stand up and own.
Yep.
It's so funny because there's an intersection between, like, how do you work with an athlete to stay injury free for, as much as possible when they have a mindset. This is just what makes athletes unique, that does not support that.
Yeah.
And it's a combination of the personality and just what it takes to be an athlete and the messages. I mean, you see it much less now, thank goodness, but there used to be shirts everywhere that said no days off, and so I have taken that, like, yeah, no days off. You know why? Because your rest is a working day. Like, you have to work at rest, especially in today's society, right? We have to intentionally and work on recharging too, which I'll say something about in a minute. But yeah, that idea of push through pain, you have to have that, When you get to a place where you are good as an athlete, there is a tendency or a need to push through pain. And so it becomes, I'm not listening to my body, right? I mean, it took me years and years, and I still struggle with it, to listen to my body, which is why I've stayed injured for so long, but off and on. And so let's take the cross-country runner. That's painful. I don't really understand. Everybody said, you're going to run every day. You'll get addicted to it. It's going to be great, and you can't miss it. That's never happened to me. Never. I really enjoy having run, But anyway, back to cross-country. It's painful. It will hurt at some point. Part of being successful is doing what you need to do, irregardless of the pain. And so at what point does that cross over to say, I'm not listening to my body, shut up, I've got to get this done. I'm not listening to my emotional state. It doesn't matter how much emotional pain I'm in. That's not part of that doesn't factor into the equation. It's non sequitur, right? And so that mentality, especially when they've competed at that level for so long, it really doesn't go away. And so it's like, well, if I quit, I'm a quitter. If I'm stopping, there's been so many athletes that I've sat with that they're in emotional pain because they're doing their sport. They hate it. They don't want to be there. It's not serving them or their identity anymore. It's just taking away. And I hear, I don't want to be a quitter, and I'm like, have you ever broken up with somebody like been in a relationship and then just y'all broke up? So you're a quitter? And they're like, no, but a breakup is quitting. So if you have a relationship with your sport and it is not serving you and it is not working out, is breaking up with that sport, knowing that you'll find somebody else, you'll find, some way else to express your competitiveness, but is that quitting? So, I look at physical injury and psychological, emotional, mental injury because, and a lot of athletes have a ton of trauma, a ton of, mental trauma, coaches that have berated them, messages that whether intentional or not, they've received about who they are and their worth as a person, things like that. And I've kind of watched my own journey because I had my first ACL tear and repair in 1990. I was in high school.
I was born 1990.
All right, we're done. I quit. I'm breaking up with this. So and it's funny. A doctor showed me a X-ray of my knee not too long ago, and it has like this giant screw in it. And he's like, "Yeah, they don't do that anymore." I was like, "Yeah, I'll go on Antiques Roadshow with it." But
yep.
But looking at what it did to me, to not be able to play my sport, to not be able to, I was a huge equestrian, let's say equestrian, that makes you think of like dressage and hunter jumper. I was more barrel racing and rodeo, but, and I broke and trained horses, which is how I tore my ACL, but I was also playing basketball and running track. And to not have that outlet, I just became this shell, while I was trying to get back on the court and on the horse and things like that. And then I look at college as soccer, and I mean, it takes away your social support. It takes away your identity. It takes away also just neurochemically. I'm not getting the endorphins. I'm not having the dopamine that I get from competition. I'm not getting the serotonin from exercise. So I'm depleted neurologically, physically, socially, spiritually, identity-wise. It's a terrible thing to go through. And it's really hard to imagine people going through that without support. I'm like, I really should have seen somebody in college for sure, just to get that. But it isn't just the professional, collegiate, high school athlete that experiences that. It's people that are gym rats. I mean, I don't think of myself as an athlete now, but I definitely thrive in a gym. And part of that is community, a big part of it, which has dictated the types of gyms that I join and things, and the support. And like the last time I was significant, I had a surgery on my arm and I had to take some time off. And if I go, sometimes if I go to the gym, I know I will not do things that are helpful to recovery. But then I also know that I have to figure out a way to connect with that community. I have to find a way also to express that part of who I am, because it's just hard to function. I mean, you hear people like, "Oh, this is my mental health. If I skip it," well, you might have to. So what do you do? Yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel like what you went through with your ACL is what sparked you to pursue your degree and what you want? Like, how did that come about? Because I'm starting to hear your personal story, which is cool.
Well, you would think that would have led directly. But I had, much like my conversation, my life is rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And I, after college, played soccer on different teams and different leagues and all that kind of stuff. And I ended up, and this is a whole different podcast, in Europe after Katrina, because Katrina just wiped away, all the teams had dispersed. Some of my best friends I'd played with for 10 years now lived in Wisconsin or California, and never get to see them again, and there weren't any team. And I hadn't not played on a team since I was 4.
Wow.
So it was really confusing time. And when it started to get going back the next fall, it was like, we're going to try to keep this going. It was just kind of like sputtering, and now it's back. But I ended up in Europe through a whole different story. And I decided I was going to try out for a team in London. And so I went and I tried out and made it, which was wild. Oh, and the manager. So you get for tryouts, you go and play with them for a week. And then, and every team has this pub that they go to after practice and after games and stuff. And the manager sat down and he's like, well, we like what we see, interested in having you on. Did want to ask, how old are you? And I was like, in my country, we don't ask. And he's like, well, we're not in your country. And I was like, I am the same age as David Beckham. And he goes, that's the best answer I've ever heard. Higher. And I was like, great. But in mid-season, they brought in a sports psychology professional, which wasn't a thing, certainly when I was going through school. And it wasn't.
Now, what year was this?
Oh, God. 2009?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just wasn't a thing. And I knew I liked working with athletes. Like when I was getting my counseling degree, I, went down to athletics at Southern Miss and formed a relationship there. And, but I didn't think that was like a path, right? Because, very few places to do that. So, yeah, but when that dude was talking to us about like performance and the mental side, I was like, that's what I want to do. That is the coolest thing ever. And because I hadn't put those pieces together explicitly, I think that I had a notion just through my own experiences. And then, when I came back, I tailored all the rest of my training and education to sports psychology. So did an internship at Colorado State Sport and Performance Program, which was cool because it's sport and performance. So we saw dancers, we saw musicians, we saw theater, actors and stuff, along with athletes because it's the same. And then I did my postdoctoral fellowship at UF, Florida Athletics. So
wow,
yeah.
So I don't know if we have enough time, but I really want to go down this Europe trail. Like, how'd you get to Europe? Like, kind of walk me through that. I'm really interested in that.
Yeah. So a teammate of mine that we were playing. So Southern Miss is close to New Orleans. It's a couple hours, right? And so every weekend I would go, and I'd lived in New Orleans for years, and then just went to grad school and still maintained all my teams that I was playing with in New Orleans. So a teammate of mine that had played at Southern Miss, and I recruited her on our team because I was like, that needs to happen, was from London. And so she was always like, you got to go. My parents would love to have you and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay. And when Katrina hit and I navigated that semester, I just needed a reset. It did not do great things for me, and I just needed to get away and take a break. So I lost my mind and went to Europe. But it was what I needed to, not try. Because I think it was, when I look, like if I was my own sports psychologist at that time, like I wasn't in a place where I really recognized it as the mental, emotional, and like psychological injury that it was. And I was trying to push through that, and which just resulted in a lot of maladaptive stuff, and I wasn't doing well. And I was like, I just need to take a step away, and this opportunity, my teammate was like, go stay at my parents. And it was supposed to be for 2 months, and it was for about 1.5 years. So I didn't stay with our parents for 1.5 years, but yeah, so it was I'm super glad I did it. It was a weird time.
Yeah. You talked about, you said you wanted to touch base on recharge.
Oh yeah.
I want to go back to that because for some reason that caught my mind.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, the Europe thing is kind of an example in a weird way. But so like your cell phone is sitting there and you're not using it. So it's not being drained. But so it's resting, but it's not recharging.
Mm-mm.
So if you plug it in, it will recharge. And I think that when we talk about self-care, you see the bubble bath and a glass of wine, or, taking a long walk on the beach or whatever, self-care. That's great. You have to have that. That's restful and relaxing. But is it recharging? And so when I talk with people about self-care, I encourage them to have two categories, the resting and the recharging. And often the recharging thing are things that I don't necessarily want to do, like yoga. I say I love yoga. I love having done yoga. It's hard for me to get there because I'm like, there's all this laundry and things I could be doing that are more active, but it really is a recharge for me. Other people find it other way, like a workout or resting, like whatever it is. But so often I look at it as something that I enjoy having done, that's recharging. I do not like the phone. I don't like FaceTime. I don't like, I'm an in-person person. So it takes a lot for me to set up that FaceTime, to make those calls, to sit on the phone with somebody and chat. And yet it is recharging. Like I've connected with my friend. I'm not going to see my bestie in Tampa, or St. Petersburg actually. But so I've got to do it. So I don't want to wait until I can be in person. It's just hard to get me to do that. And oftentimes that is the cue for me, that's the recharge, And so Europe was kind of like, I felt like I wanted to rest. I wanted to quit. And it was a lot of hard work to get there and stay there. And honestly, it was a lot of hard work to take that break because I saw myself as defeated. And I think that's very common,
Very.
like I'm going to take a break because I've been defeated, and it's like, for an athlete's mindset, you don't take a break because that's part of your workout plan. You take a break because CJ told me to, So I think that was part of it, like just being able to recognize that I needed that step away, and that there was some healing, and I had to admit that there was an injury there. And so I think that's why it became a recharge, because it certainly wasn't restful. It was awesome, but traveling and working and, edit this out, but evading a visa, like it's, all work.
Yeah.
And it was exactly what I needed,
And what's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking I'm very similar to you when it comes to the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And running a business is hard when you're not on your phone.
Yeah.
And you're probably, obviously you're doing that now. And when I talk to my friend Armani, who's like, we basically grew up together and still really close friends. We still go see each other. And I know like roughly around the 3-4 month marker, I start to feel like you need to call him. And so like every 3-4 months we check in with each other, but me and him are like an in-person thing too. We'd rather spend a week with each other than be on the phone.
Yeah. It's so funny when somebody contacts me, wants to set up an appointment, and they're like, so here's my number. I'm like,
Same.
I text it? Is it,
Same.
It's like, no, make the call.
Make the call.
Yeah.
Like even when I reach out to like new leads, I'm just like, it takes so much energy for me to do that.
Yeah.
And I have to give myself enough grace to be like, once you contact all these leads that you either neglected or you haven't reached out to, then you need to go take a nap.
Yes.
And I'm like, it kind of goes in that vein, like, I didn't do that much today, but for your personality, you did.
Yes. Yeah. Are you an introvert?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny. I know it's shocking. I'm not. But for introverts, we think of introvert and extrovert as like, oh, I'm quiet, I'm shy, but it's often like you are very people oriented. You're very relational. But it's where we get our energy, So like my husband's a true introvert, which has been such a growth journey for me. And I am a true extrovert. And so we come back from a party, but you can't tell us apart at a party. He's mingling, I'm mingling, we're getting, doing the things. And he comes home and he needs to not talk to me. And I like go on and on. Like, did you meet this person? Did you hear what they said? Like, this is so cool. Did you hear their job? Like, I think we should get together with them. And he's like, I don't want to talk, And so figuring out those patterns. But yeah, and that is such an important thing to know about yourself. What takes your energy? What apps on your phone are draining your battery? And we will often either delete those or mitigate for that. And we don't do that with ourselves.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That just had me connect the dots too. It's just like, I've learned about that too as I'm pursuing, I don't know if I told you this, but I'm getting my master's in biblical counseling.
Nice.
And so it's very slow. And one of the things that I'm learning more about myself, to be honest, in the courses.
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, like this app is draining my energy, or like if I need to have enough energy to be able to reach out to these leads, even though this app is not bad for me to have, it's still taking from me.
Yeah.
And so, man, it's so interesting. It's interesting too how we put so much hard work into whether our athletic careers or our business careers or any type of continued education. And yet when it comes to like relationships, like stuff like this, we're just like, oh, we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
We don't need to have to do the hard work for that.
Right.
It's like, what?
I know.
And the more and more I study it, the more and more I'm like, nope, we got to spend time.
We do. And I think it's, you have to be intentional about it because like my bestie in St. Petersburg, she's not going anywhere. Next time I see her, if it's a year from now, it's going to be like, we saw each other yesterday. And because of that, so in other things like continuing education or, the leads thing or whatever, if we don't attend to that, it's gone.
Yep.
And so there's more of a sense of urgency, or if it's for somebody else, that makes it easier, like it's easier for me to call somebody when I know they're going through a hard time and I want to check in. But when I'm going through a hard time, and it's like, well, if I work harder, it'll go away. It doesn't.
So true.
But yeah, so I think that's why we have to be intentional about it, because it's so easy to put on the back burner because it can wait, and just because it can wait doesn't mean it should.
Yeah. And I like how you distinguished introverts and extroverted. It just depends on where you're getting and taking your energy from, because a lot of people, they don't think that I'm introverted. Like I'm cool with like me and you talking.
Yeah.
And it won't necessarily drain me to a degree. But if there was multiple people in this room, I'd be like, oof.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you like when we met, you were leading classes, you were so gregarious and fun and like,
I totally forgot about this.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so, and so I think people would walk away and be like, he's such a fun extrovert. And that's not what it's about, like introverts are not necessarily like serious, quiet, not goofy kind of people.
That's bringing me back to when I was coaching CrossFit at the gym. Now, right when you said that, the first person that popped in my head, because I knew that you were there, was Haley.
Oh my gosh.
You two walking in. I could not wait to have both you guys in the room because you have no idea what was about to go down.
But I am certain that you had to take a nap when you were done with us.
I don't know. I was laughing so hard. I probably don't remember.
Yes. And both of us were so motivated in that gym. It was so fun.
Yeah, it was such a good time. But yeah, I think introverts get like this bad rep of thinking like they're just not a people person, or they assume that they're extroverted. And it's just not the case. Like there's people who, one of my friends met his idol that speak at huge conferences, thousands of people, and finally got to meet him in a room, one person, and talked to him for a good 15 minutes. And he was so awkward. He could barely look at me. He was very quiet. And it's like, yeah, just because people know how to put on a show doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they're extroverted.
Right. Or they allow that part of their personality to come out. Doesn't mean that, that's not draining for them.
Yeah.
And here's why it's important because, like I use my husband as an example, like Haley and I, we could be like that for 8 hours of the day together, burn some places down, laughing and having fun, cutting up and everything. But like my husband, I need to know that when he's quiet, when he is like, hey, I'm done, that's not about me. That's about his energy. And I don't have to understand to respect it, and I don't have to have a similar experience to try to help with that. And I can help by not going on, 90 to nothing. And if I need to, I'll call Haley or, like if I need to, I have those outlets and, and I think it changes as we get older in terms of how we mitigate that. But it is important to know because I have like one of my other best friends, also in Florida. I don't know what it is with
What about
Florida.
these Florida people?
I don't know. One of the things that we love about each other is that we can sit together for an hour. We took a car ride for an hour to an hour and a half and not say anything. And I know where she is. And there was part of that where I was actually talking and I knew that she wasn't going to respond because, she's an introvert and that's not, and we had extroverted a good bit the night before. So like, but knowing that I think helps me give in our relationship in the way that will feed the relationship. So,
Yeah. And it's like, once you've spent enough time with that person, then you have that trust where you can be yourself, you can talk to them. And just because kind of goes that boundary, what you said about like how to deal with people not really reaching out or texting you so quickly is your expectations change because the trust is so much there. It's like they're not responding because they don't care about me.
Right.
They're not responding because they're tired or they just want to listen today.
Right. Or they're busy, whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's important to know just in general that people are different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're walking through like an athlete who everyone just knows, like this coach is just tough and everyone has it. Everyone runs in these coaches. I have, and that coach has a very, I'm not going to say they're narcissistic, but they have a lot of narcissistic traits.
Okay.
So what do you like, how do you walk through an athlete when not only the team's that way, the staff is like also having a hard time with the head coach? Like it's just a difficult person to deal with.
Yeah.
How do you address that, but also maintain your boundaries to protect yourself? Because that's tricky waters.
It is. It can be. I think, first of all, one of the things that I really try to impress upon people that I think it's difficult for people to understand, like if one of your clients came to me and was like, CJ is such an ass, like, nobody would, but if they did,
Yeah.
they're like, he's just hard, he's difficult, like everything. I'm not a client of yours, so I don't have that relationship. So it is very possible, one of my close friends was a coach here for a long time. And there was a lot of trust between us because, his players would come in and like, I can't deal with it. He's awful. Like, oh, he did this. And, they can make anything sound like he's a monster, and that's not, the client coming to me, that's not the CJ I know, because it's just a different person. CJ the coach, different,
Yeah.
It's a different relationship. It's a different power dynamic. It's all the difference. Right. And so, knowing that, and then also I think people can be really caught up in what's right and wrong and have a very difficult time accepting what they see as wrong. Fair enough. We got to have that in our lives to know when we need to walk away or set boundaries or like whatever. But the bottom line is it is very rare. And I mean, and if ever it has happened that you're going to change a coach or I'm going to change a coach. They've been hired and this is the way they're going to do their job. And it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, unless it's hurting you personally. Are you going to change your expectations? Are you going to, and how much does that cost you? You know, there are certain limits. There are certain things you have to work through and say, is accepting this and adapting worth the cost to me? You know, it happens all the time when coaches they say things that are personal. Like, you know, they're not saying that was a terrible shot. They're like, how shitty are you today? You know, like that kind of thing. And so that will likely not change even with feedback. And so are you able to depersonalize it? Are you able to put a different filter on that? And if not, and fair enough, there's no judgment in that. It's like you can't handle it. It's not that. It's that I don't want to be talked to that way. So thank God for the transfer portal, right? And I'm serious. Like, I think that I was a big proponent of, I mean, it's turned into a shit show, but I was a big proponent for the transfer portal. Like, you shouldn't have to, you know, have this one-time passer. Like, if a coach isn't following through on what, you know, the picture he painted in recruiting, you shouldn't be trapped there. Or if it's just not working out, or you have experienced something at the university that you really should be able to get away from, or, you know, like you should be able to do that. This is your life, have some agency, right? And it's turned into something else, and there's no great answer for it, but that's the thing. So this, you get a job, and your boss is just a tool. Like, he's just not a great person. Do you adjust to that or look for a different job? And sometimes that's harder than just get a different job. It's not that easy, right? And so how do you almost have the boundaries within yourself to say, you know, this is how I'm going to interpret that. This is how I'm going to handle that. This is, you know, what I'm going to do with that. And here's how I'm going to take care of myself in that. So walking through that, I think there were a lot of athletes that, again, they just had a different relationship with their coach in high school. And, you know, they were more of a father or mother figure to them and all that. And that's not, I think just about every coach is like, we're a family. And it's like, no. You know, so it's, it's been, sometimes they go through that process and they do the work and realize, oh, it was my expectation and my expectation and my desire for this person to be somebody and something they're not. It wasn't what they were doing, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's what they're doing.
Yeah.
But not always.
I was about to say, like, I bet you guys have had experiences, whether it's you or your coworkers that, you know, you talk to across the nation, where it's just like, no, this coach is just mean. And to be honest with you, should not be coaching.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but you can always work on the 1%, even if it's 99% their fault. Like, you still have 1%, like, you give your power back. That's what I like hearing about when you're giving all these good feedback of these good examples, just like with the phone and recharging. Like, it's very practical examples. You can see the bigger picture. It's allowing people to, like, listen, like, this might be bad, but you can still learn from this. And how can you grow as a person in this? And maybe that is jumping in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the growth of you taking that step and going to another university. Maybe that's how you get a stronger mental health, you know, and perform better. And so I bet you've seen tons of people just grow so drastically through that process.
And sometimes it is, they make the decision that they're walking away from their sport. And not always. Sometimes it's staying in the same place. And, you know, I think it is such a valuable life lesson. Like, what can you control and what do you want to control, and what, you know, can you not control that you want to control? What, you know, can you control that you don't want to control? You know, it's looking at all that and saying, all right, However, I will say this. There is a tendency, particularly with the athlete mindset, tends to be very outcome oriented, outcome driven. And so there has to be something between there's a problem, here's the solution, because you can't ignore where you are, you know?
Right.
To have the best case scenario and solution, you go through that, okay, I'm going to sit in this pain with you, which is hard to do, and say, yeah, I can see you're really hurting from this. I can see, and they always want, well, what do I do? Okay, let's just talk about where you are right now. And because it's a surprising form of avoidance to jump to the solution.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah. And so it's that, have you ever seen the Brene Brown video
Yes.
on empathy, sympathy?
Yep.
So staying in it with them allows them to recharge so they have the energy and the wisdom and the strength for the solution.
Yeah, that's a good way to say that too. It is a kind of a way to deflect.
Mm-hmm.
And
Not
to
always.
And to keep shoving down your feelings if it becomes a pattern.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's like, you just got to figure out the solution really quick.
Yes.
Like, because your house is burning down, you got to get the dog out.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But we're not talking about that here.
Yes,
We're
no.
talking about seriously, like, hey, like nothing's on fire.
Mm-hmm.
You got time to fix this problem, and you have time to think about it.
Yeah. And we got to take care of you before we can get to the solution, because it takes a while to fill out paperwork, or to finish out the season or whatever it is. So how do we take care of you in that?
Yeah. Now, jumping subjects, me, going down rabbit holes.
Let's do another one.
You talked about your husband being an introvert and you had to learn a lot. What did you learn? Because I think that's really practical stuff.
Yeah.
Coming from you with all your experiences with all these relationships, and then you have your own.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that it's not about me, it's not, I think the biggest thing too is that I don't have to understand it to respect it. I don't have to, I could say I get it. I don't get it. You need, and I mean, I've obviously had interactions where I need to rest after, but it's usually like, wow, that person had a lot going on or draining or whatever. But yeah, I think that's one thing I've learned is that, people are just fundamentally different. And if I have thoughts like, well, that's weird, I don't get that I'm disconnecting from that person, and if I can approach with curiosity and respect, then that brings us together. And I learn a crap ton, people are cool, they're funny, they're, creative and different. And I love that. But if I judge people, I judge behavior, I judge attitudes, or I judge ways of being and moving through the world, then I surround myself only with people that are exactly like me, and we don't grow in that context.
Yeah.
We grow in a context that challenges us. So sitting with somebody that is very different and understanding, knowing there's a limit to that understanding, then we'll grow in that. And I've also, the other thing I've learned is the value of being quiet and the value of slowing down and just resting.
Yeah.
Because that's not in my nature,
Yeah. And it's so interesting to say the people you surround yourself with too. Cause like, obviously I'm getting my degree in biblical counseling, and then I have a friend who's atheist, but he has psychology, and he's straight up just going down the clinical tools. And then me and him have some
the social sciences.
yeah. And me and him have some great conversations. Like, obviously we vastly disagree on a lot of stuff, but it's like his wisdom that he has with some of the tools that he tells me and what's working at a practical level. Mm-hmm. I'm like, man, that is some gold right there, And so, it goes to what you said, like, be more curious. It reminded me when you said that. Have you ever watched Ted Lasso?
Oh, 100%.
Right.
Yes.
That's one of his best quotes. Is like, be curious.
Yep.
So So that's what, right when you said that, it literally popped in the image in my head with Ted Lasso.
Yes, be curious. Well, and it also, like, when we're curious, it is almost almost an anthem to expectation. So if I go in and I say, I wonder how fast my mile will be today, then I'm curious and I work on it. But if I am like, I need an 8-minute mile today, and I look at, halfway in and I'm not on pace, that sucks,
Yeah.
and I'm disappointed in myself. Oh, I have this analogy that I've been using lately that I love. Okay.
I've already loved all your analogies so far, so keep them coming. I'm pocketing them all right now.
I'm an analogy person. So, okay, when you were growing up, who did most of the cooking in your family?
I would say my dad.
Okay. So, what is a meal that was pretty regular in your household that your dad would cook that was good? It was good.
Hamburgers.
Hamburgers. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what was a meal that either he or your mom would cook that was like, oh, man, I can't wait. That's the stuff. Pasta. Okay. So if you're at school and you talk to your dad and you're like, oh, what's for dinner? He's like, hamburgers. How do you feel about that?
How do I feel? How I feel, I start to taste it in my mouth.
Yeah, and it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. And I'm thinking like, dang, I wish I was home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, y'all connect during the day, and he says, hey, man, we're having pasta. And I got fresh Parmesan cheese, not the green can.
The green can.
Now, how do you feel?
I'm jealous again.
Like, are you excited?
Yep.
A little more excited than the hamburger?
More excited than the hamburgers because it's different and it's going to be more organic. Yep.
Yeah. So you leave school on the day he said, hey, we're having hamburgers, and you walk in, you have hamburgers. Good.
Yeah.
You leave school, and on a day he said, hey, we're having pasta. You get home and it's pasta. You're like, fantastic. You leave school, you go home. He's told you there's going to be pasta, but he looked at the Parmesan cheese and it was moldy and put it off to tomorrow so you could get some more fresh, and it's hamburgers. How do you feel now?
I'm disappointed.
But something that was good and standard and decent, you just made into a disappointment.
That's right.
And the reality is that the pasta gets all the gold, the hamburger keeps you alive.
Yeah.
So the great moments in our workouts, in our athletic performance, in our jobs, like make us feel good and get the shining glory and the certificates and the awards and everything.
Yeah.
But the consistently good keeps us going and wins the game. It's all the people around there doing their job consistently, and out of consistency, greatness will pop up. So if you expect the good, the great happens. But what happens is that we adjust our standards so that we always are going for the great, and consistently good beats inconsistently great all day long.
Yep.
And so don't take your hamburgers and make them into disappointments because it's not pasta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that because it's, again, if I would have jumped in the mind of curiosity, like, oh, I wonder why that didn't happen. That would happen. Like, and then you go into, then you're like, oh, okay. You get it.
Yeah. Or if you're at school and you're like just thinking, what's for dinner tonight? I wonder.
Yeah.
And you walk in, it's hamburger. Great. That's pretty standard. And then every now and then you get the pasta,
Yeah.
But you're not disappointed because you were just wondering and curious because it's going to be a standard. You know it's going to be good. Every now and then you're going to have some Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
But that still sustains you,
Yeah.
So yeah, being curious about what's for dinner.
I'm so glad you shared that because it's got me thinking now as I'm training to ride motocross and continue to get faster on my dirt bike. And obviously there's a lot of high risk in that because you're also jumping in the air. Sometimes it's 110 feet across. So it's a very extreme sport.
Yeah.
And so, probably the most extreme sport I've ever done. And now I'm thinking instead of going to the track and thinking, well, my fastest time last time was a 152. I'm thinking, I wonder what my lap time will be today,
Mm-hmm.
because the dirt changes. The moisture in the air changes, which changes the dirt too. And so the
Mm-hmm.
track could technically be slower that day.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really fascinating. Now that kind of helped me connect the dots of like, that's the stuff that I feel like even when I took a class on you, that's what actually makes such good performance gains.
And like with motocross, when you're curious and you're like, this was my time yesterday, I wonder, there are things that you're working on, you know, whether it's pacing or whether it's positioning or, recoil, like whatever you're working on. And when you focus on those, the outcome will be what it will be. And so then you get to experience like, oh, that made it faster, or I'm getting better at this. But when you make it outcome oriented, then you're just going to see how fast you can go. You're not focusing on that process of what is going to make you better.
Right.
Or hopefully safer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if for me specifically, with just how high the risk of error is, of crashing and just breaking a bone is high. So if I'm more curious, I will ride safer, because I'm not chasing something. I'm not paying attention to my braking or my acceleration zones, because I mean that could really mess you up.
So what happens if that makes you a half step slower? Well, it might.
Yeah.
And first of all, you're focusing on what's going to eventually get you faster. And when you don't break a bone, you get to do it longer.
And you're consistent.
And you're consistent, and you don't have those big crashes that take you out of a race,
Yep.
Whether it's, you get hurt or not, those crashes. So when you are maybe a half step slower, it's that consistency. You can do it.
And it's interesting you say that, because I talked to 2 professional motocross riders, and I'm like, what do I need to do to get better? Right. Cause I'm like, they've done the race. They've made it to the top of the level. Like, tell me what I need to do. And they were both of them said, you don't need to be fast. They didn't go down the whole, like, you got to be able to do this. Both of them said seat time. Without a doubt. Like, you got to stay on the bike.
Yeah.
If you're not getting on the bike, you're not going to make practice. And like you said, consistency. And so now, like, when I'm going to track, I'm trying to be very aware. And compared to all my friends, I rarely ever crash with the amount of seat time I'm getting. And I actually crashed 3 weeks ago. It was just like a freak accident. I just tipped over in a corner. But when I tipped over in a corner, I hit like a soft spot in the dirt, and it dislocated my shoulder. And so I'm like, dang it. The first thing I thought of was like, I'm going to lose my consistency.
Yeah.
But I also knew that's something when I looked back, I'm like, I really couldn't control that. Like, that wasn't because I was trying to go fast.
Right.
It was just simply like, it was just a weird thing.
That's the sport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so how would you address somebody? We'll just use me as an example. I'm going to the starting line. There's 40 bikes on the gate, and I'm there, and I'm nervous. I'm sweating. Like, I'm trying to figure this out. Like, I'm being curious and all these things.
Yeah.
How do you address somebody that has pretty high competitive anxiety, I guess you would call it? I don't know if that's a way to describe it.
So first of all, nothing is going to be there at race time that you didn't practice.
Yeah.
So what helps you with that physiological arousal and regulating that? And then, sometimes it's really helpful to figure out why and to recognize what it is. So like, think about a time you've been nervous. And now think about a time that you've been super excited. Like, you are making a call, and you know that this person's going to say yes to a date, and you are like, how physiologically, how are you feeling? And it's the same.
Yeah.
The difference is the cognitive appraisal. So in one, you are thinking of all the good that can happen, and in the other, you're thinking there's threats. You're thinking of all the bad. We are biologically wired to assess the threats. So we have to be more intentional about bringing in the balance of the possible good, because it doesn't help our species survive to notice all the reasons there's not going to be a tiger attack today.
Right. Yeah.
So we have to bring that in intentionally and use that to balance the driver of the excitement. And then, having practiced emotion regulation, having practiced breathing and bringing yourself into the moment. For example, anxiety cannot live in the present moment. It's always about the future or the past.
Yep.
So but with adrenaline and, our biological makeup, that adrenaline is like, look for the threat, assess, what's worst case scenario, and let's prepare for that. And so, we have to have practice, because it's like you're fighting biology, and, including adrenaline, that it's using for support. So you have to be pretty practiced at that. And so if I said, hey, here's something you can try on the bike, you're like, great, I'm going to try that at my next race. Like, you're not going to have it. You have to have it so consistently that you can do it even when you're anxious or excited. So the physiological arousal and regulation is a main part of it. But then also, what is the threat? It used to be tiger attacks. It used to be that, we were trying to survive in caves or whatever.
Yeah.
When our system evolved. But now the threats are things like our ego. That usually holds a ton of the threat.
Yeah.
Or assesses a lot of the threat. Our identity, our sense of purpose, our sense of self-worth. And so looking at what is tied up in that performance, because it's just like, I enjoy the sport. I like it. I want to test myself against other competitors. You're going to be able to compete, and that the nerves will actually help. There's an inverted U, right? So it helps you until it doesn't. And so you have to know what's pushing it over to the doesn't. And a lot of times it's things like people are not going to be impressed by me. I'm not, if I don't place in this race, then I don't belong in the sport. I don't, don't amount to anything, or,
Yeah.
So what pushes it over? That's actually called the zone of optimal performance. And for some it's a 3, and for some it's an 8. For, a rifle shooter, it might be 2 or 3. You got to be pretty steady.
Yeah.
And then for a soccer player, it could be like 6 or 7, right? So you have to know what that number is for you, what drives that number up and what drives it down. So a lot of times what drives it down are truths like, my family loves me, this is not determining my self-worth. That's not a good thought, because it's placed in negative, not positive. But I'm worthy. I'm enough. This is fun. I love doing this. I love competing. This is a test of where I am, not who I am. Those sorts of things can bring it down. And breathing, just 4-4-8, 4 in, hold for 4, 8 helps.
And what's crazy too that you say that about the breathing. So when I started noticing my breath gets like lighter or not as deep. And so when I'm at the starting gate, I breathe in nice and deep, and then exhale nice and slow, and just to calm down a little bit and to realize like, I'm doing this and I'm having fun.
Yeah.
Like, this is, all the hard work is already done. This is where you showcase, and based on the outcome, it tells you what you need to work on. And so it kind of helps me enjoy it more. And what's interesting is, after hearing you talk about that, there's this guy named Eli Tomac. He's won 4 motocross championships. He's won 2. He's going to likely go down as one of the legends of the sport, and he's still racing at 32 or 31 years old, which is rare. And he's still keeping up with these young kids who are in their younger 20s and just shredding still. And he has a family and all this. And you have all these people on like Sports Center and the podcast that they have and little radio shows that they have, and saying, he's not going to send it like he would when he was younger. He's got 3 kids, all this stuff. There's no way he's going to do any of that stuff anymore. Like, putting all this pressure on him. And then I remember Eli basically was just like, I wouldn't be out here if I wasn't going to try to perform. Like, this is, I have a family, but I also know what I'm capable of. And I'm not going to use my family as a crutch of why I can't perform.
Right.
And so I was like, man, that made me think, as you were talking, like, he's seeing somebody mentally, like he is sharp. Like even when he
Yeah.
lost a race, he's not, some of these athletes are just butthurt.
Yeah.
And he's on the podium. He's been doing it for so long. He's like, I didn't change my lineup at the last 5 minutes of the race. That cost me. And that's why I lost.
Yeah.
And he just moves on.
Yes. I assessed, and here's what I will change going forward.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting. There was, I can't remember if it was a study, an actual study or just anecdotal, but for women on our national soccer team and in the WSL, WSL, WNSL. So they, after they have a kid or kids, they sometimes come back and they've increased their time and they've increased their aggressive play and they are performing better. And talking to some of them, they'll say like, well, first of all, I have a different threshold for pain, like that doesn't hurt, or, that's, I can go through whatever, like, because confidence isn't about like, oh, this is the outcome I'm going to have. It's, I can handle whatever the outcome is because I believe in what I'm doing right now.
I like that.
So, so then also they have a different purpose. They have a different why. It's not when you perform and your entire self-worth is on the line. That's too much, and you perform with fear because that's fear. When you perform and you have purpose that is so meaningful and motivating and you're passionate about, now you can perform with everything you have, and the fear is not holding you back.
Right.
It's almost like you have a dog.
I grew up with dogs.
You grew up with dogs.
Yeah.
Your family dog, think of your family dog. If I was like, hey, let's have a race, I would not do this. And let's put $10 on it. You'd be like, oh, that's fun. Let's do that. And I'm like, let's put $400 on it. Now you're like, oh, okay, that's a little less fun, but yeah, we can do it. I can handle that. I can handle what happens. But then I say, all right, whoever wins this race gets your family's dog. That's a different deal.
You ain't kidding.
Yeah. I mean, I am now fearful of the outcome. It's too much. I'm not going to perform at my best because all of a sudden I'm like questioning, am I good enough? Do I have enough? Somehow I need this. Like, need is a word. You need food, clothing, shelter, love, and belonging.
Yeah.
You do not need a birdie on a golf course. But I've said, I need this. I need this outcome. Either I haven't been trying my best. I have to try my best now, or I've been trying my best and now I need better than my best.
Yeah.
And that's not possible. Right. So it just pushes it to a level that's not going to be performance enhancing. And it's not real.
Yeah.
It's not real. Like, very few people, even people who play pro, have had to skip a meal because they lost a game or a match or a tournament,
Yeah.
or have been, So it's just not real. It's not a real threat.
Now, you talked about like putting your worth on the line. And I'm always curious of how people operate with like finding your worth. What does that look like? Because obviously right now, like religion is like a huge topic and it's like, don't talk about that, but I'm always curious.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm getting my biblical counseling degree and obviously I am a Christian. How, when you come up with people and they have this different types of religions, because I have clients who are all different types. I've had a Buddhist priest. I've gotten to be around a whole bunch of different people. I had a roommate who was Muslim, and he was a great roommate and me and him were friends.
Yeah.
How do you put yours aside, or how you practice versus the athletes, or like, where's that? Like, that's challenging, right?
I think it was, but now having that conversation, like, what does it mean to you? Like, how does it help you? And I've had, let's say two Christian clients, and one is like, man, when I pray and I'm able to give the outcome over and say, I am focusing on what I'm doing and the outcome is yours, or I'm not worried, I'm placing my worries in a place that's outside myself and recognizing what I don't control. And I do talk about, like, is it really helpful to pray for a win, or is it helpful to pray for peace? And so what do you really want? Because you can go on Amazon and buy a trophy, you know?
Yeah.
So what do you really want? And are you asking for that? But then another, if I were to just dive in and say, well, how about you pray? Like, here's part of the Christian faith. Like, give your worries over to the Lord. Pray. Well, I've missed the fact that there are many times that when this person is praying, they feel unworthy. They feel a sense of shame. They feel like they have to be so formal, and now they're like feeling guilty that they have, not been to church, or they haven't been, a good witness, or whatever it is. I've missed that. And so prayer is not going to be their faith still, but it's not going to be helpful for them. And so what is my job in that? Have they come to me because they want tools for a better performance, or have they come to me, which they are absolutely welcome, to say, hey, I'm having some spiritual struggles, and I want to have a better relationship with, my higher power, and things. And the other thing is, I think when it comes to, we believe, we have theology, we have, these great discussions, all these things. But when it comes to our spirituality, I think we are so much more similar than dissimilar. We're all looking for something that's bigger than ourselves.
Yep.
That gives meaning and purpose, that gives us a sense that there's meaning and order when we feel nothing but chaos, that somebody's in control and making sense of stuff that we can't control and makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
That the most comforting thing for a lot of people is everything happens for a reason. If I think that's one that I check out, because for me, that's never been helpful. That's not something that I ascribe to necessarily. And yet, if I came in and I was like, that's not going to be helpful, then I miss it that client, that person really finds that helpful, and that's what they need. And do I know, like, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, that things don't happen for a reason? Some things are random, and not everything is purposeful. I don't know. That's a belief that I hold, but I don't believe everything that I think, And so there's that. This is just my belief.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to push that to say that's not the case, because maybe it is. This is just so it's really about finding out there's that spirituality that is on my intake form. I ask the question, is your faith, your spirituality important in your life? If so, how?
That helps a lot.
I don't care if they're Muslim. I don't care if they're just, like, if they say not really, I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
What does motivate you? What is your passion? What is bigger than you? What are your values? But then when somebody says, yes, very much so, I'm a Christian and I belong to this church, I'm like, great. What is bigger than yourself? What are your values? What is your purpose? So it's kind of, because we all experience it differently. And a lot of that is based in experience and upbringing and messages, interpretations, all that.
Yeah. Now, did you grow up like in a culture that was like religious, and do you feel like that kind of shaped your career, or was it different? Like, I'm always curious of how people grew up in that accent and how it influenced to be, because you're really good at what you do.
Well, thank you. I think it had. So my parents were staunch Calvinists, like not just Presbyterian, but John Calvin was the man. And so everything happens for a purpose, and it's all predestined. It's all, and there's a clear black and white of how to be and how not to be. And I wasn't necessarily down with that. And I fought the predestination thing pretty hard, pretty young. Like, I remember having conversations,
especially with the Calvin. Like, you're already thinking at a deep level.
Yeah, well, because I remember at 12 having an argument with our youth pastor over predestination, and he signed the book. What was what's it called? Plan of God. Anyway, Stuart. It was a book on, and I still was like, I don't know. But anyway, and then I went to a very, very religious, legalistic boarding school
Wow.
that very much kind of shaped the way I saw things and shaped the experiences I have with other people. And there was a lot that was like, I felt like it should work for me, but it doesn't. And so there was something wrong with me that, you know, I'm experiencing this because I have a lack of faith or whatever. And so I think, and then I went to a Catholic Jesuit university.
I haven't even think about that.
I know. And so it's like, I think it's always been kind of, religion is very academic to me. And I have been able to notice places where the spirituality has been lacking. And the older I've gotten, the more I've been able to connect with that spirituality and let go of the religion piece.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, not in that way that's like, well, I'm more spiritual than religion. No, there's a place for both. And so it's not forsaking religion for spirituality. It's just knowing the place that, like when religion starts to interfere with a relationship with God, you know?
Yeah.
Or knowing what things are helpful for me and what's not, and what are my beliefs. And so, and I think because growing up that way, I have had a pretty non-judgmental and very accepting way of interacting with people's different views and different beliefs and different religions. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what works, works.
Especially with how you wrestled so early at 12, talking about predestination. I mean, I didn't grow up religious at all until I was 24 and I got saved. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here? I was living with my grandmother and she was like very non-judgmental, grace-filled, and taught me all these things. I'm just like, and would always invite me in church, but it was never mandatory. Obviously, I was in my early 20s, but yeah, so it kind of changed my. Do you feel like now? Where are you at now with you personally? Where are you at now? Like, are you Calvin trained now, or are you like?
Well, so we go to the Episcopal Church.
Yeah.
A lot of it, I love my children growing up with that kind of like, and I think there are people, like if I look at, okay, how would the people at my boarding school see that? And it's like, oh, that's a cafeteria style religion. And I mean, I think sitting there thinking, what is feeding me spiritually and what is nourishing me? And so being aware of my tendency to judge myself based on legalism and not what feeds me, what is helpful, what, is really grace, the message of grace, and that's in the gospel. So I think for me, it's much more a personal journey than I'm listening. Not that I of course listen to the homilies, listen to the sermon and everything, but knowing that it's not about that. It's about what I'm taking and what I'm getting and what's helping me. Not in a cafeteria style, because when we go through, this is not a great analogy, but if we go through a cafeteria, I want the brownies and I want the mashed potatoes but I know I'm going to have to get the turkey because that creates a balanced meal. I'm going to have to get some green beans on there, to stay healthy. And so maybe it is like, how am I balancing that? Because I have to be aware of my tendency to judge myself based on the rules. And I don't believe that Christianity is about the rules, and so that's an easy way to get off track with my faith.
Yep.
Is the theology.
Especially how you grew up with how legalistic you grew up with. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I have a friend who grew up very legalistic, and she just basically just fled the faith and was like, nope, not doing any of that. And then when she started actually reading and listening to the message on his grace and how the commandments are actually a measuring stick of your holiness, not your value as a human being, because Christ has died for you on the cross. That's where you get your value. The sacrifice is done.
Yeah.
But you just use the commandments as a measuring stool every time. Like, am I improving to be a better person to be able to give God more glory?
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that was really fascinating too. Is like, cause there's a guy who is a psychiatrist who came to Christ Pres Church, and he was saying, like, you have to realize people have look at, just like what you said on the podcast, people look at the world through different lenses. And so if somebody looks through the lens, and he just brought up two opposing threats, he's like, I know these get thrown out a lot, but they're a good analogy. He was just like, some people look through the lens of scripture of codependency, right? And then some look at the scriptures are narcissistic. And so how they view through those lens actually can corrupt what scripture is actually trying to say.
Yeah.
And so I thought you would think that was fascinating.
We talk about things can get misinterpreted through text. I like talking to people face to face because email, text, misconstrued, they're reading it from their experience through their lens. Why wouldn't we think the same of scripture?
That's right.
You know, and because it's God's text, literally. And there's not a ton of burning bushes around for us to talk to. So, like, maybe should be more. But, although I do get some pretty bright neon signs every now and then, but it's not much of a dialogue. It's like, do this.
Yeah.
But I think that, knowing what gets lost in translation, what gets lost in interpretation, and what feeds you and what doesn't. And so growing up with all the rules in the black and white and everything, there wasn't a ton of grace in that. There wasn't a ton of you're worthy as a person. And so it's very much like athletics. My worth is in my performance, in what I do, and how I'm, following the team rules. Am I a good teammate? Am I good, and those things are important, but they're not who you are.
Yeah.
And that's not what your worth is based on. And so can you score an old goal and still be worthy?
Right.
Or can you accidentally hit it into your own goal and your team love you and think you're still good as a player?
Yeah.
And, because that devastates some people. And they're like, I'm never going to have the respect of my teammates again. It's like, hey, you screwed up.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you that. That sucked.
Yeah.
But there's no grace in our, self-judgment of that. So.
Yeah. And that's what's really inspired me, just hearing your story too. That's really inspired me to pursue counseling, and just strictly through a biblical lens. 'Cause I feel super convicted, and I know not everybody feels this way, but just only work with people who are professing Christians that are wrestling with shame. And so like that, I just love going down those rabbit holes. I'm like, well, what is this? What do you think the scripture means in the context of the whole Bible? Who were they talking to? Why were they talking to it? How do we apply it today? Like, I want to know, like, where are you getting this from?
Yeah.
And so that's what's fascinating with me about it. And it goes into like what you said about performance. They're not being curious. They're just being like, oh, this is judgmental. This is what I have to be. This is what my grandmother said,
Here's a whole list of do's and don'ts.
Yep.
And am I checking the boxes? And so it is, I think we live in such a productive based, like product based and outcome based in terms of values society. And so, you hear like, oh, well, first of all, you hear he's got such great potential. You rarely hear like he's such a good person. He is a great athlete and he's a kind, teammate, and he's academically, like all these things, right? And so athletes that are really good get that message pretty early. It's not about who you are; it's about who you will be and who you can be, and you're not worth anything until you achieve that. And the reality is, you never achieve your potential.
Yeah. That is so true.
Yeah, especially when that's all you're shooting for, right? And so, because you're not developing who you are, you're just chasing this outcome. And so it's kind of similar where like, who are you? And is that, like, I talk a lot about, and this is related, but like I talk a lot about to clients about, your identity as a soccer player, for example, I was aggressive, sometimes a dirty player. I was very determined. I was offensively minded. I had very ambitious, and I took risks. And that's how I live my life. That's what I do in my job. That's what I do in my career. That's how I am with my kids. Ferocious and ambitious, and having to pull myself back sometimes, and because of I can be aggressive. So it's like, not with my kids. That's not
Right.
what I meant. But like, we're going to do this, and so I have to pay attention to that. And so that's who I am. That's what made me a good soccer player. But that also makes me a good business owner. It makes me a good mom. It makes me a good wife. Like, so when we look at, it's not about the outcome. Nobody's ever asked me how many goals I scored or how many games I won. I have had people ask me, what were you like as a player? I'm like, well, I mean, this is kind of it,
Yeah.
And so when we recognize that, it's about who we are, not what we're doing. And that's the same with spirituality, like who we are versus what we're doing. When we place value on that, we tend to do the right things.
Right.
And we tend to walk out with wins.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's one quote that had me thinking while you were saying that I've just been like really like meditating on, but it was like for people who are always just like so like focused on performance based, he's like, he said, don't focus on who you are, but whose you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that is really good too.
Yeah.
Because it reminds you, like, as for me, as a believer, it's like, it reminds me of, okay, what did Christ do for me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it draws me outside of myself.
Yes.
Which goes back to what we all talked about. Like, there is a personal responsibility that we need to take. Like, you do definitely build confidence. Like what you said, you do need to look at your history. Like, am I getting better as a person? Like, you can't just be like, well, it's just Jesus all the time. It's like, that's great. I'm glad that is. But you also have to evaluate your own fruit.
Yeah. It's interesting. That brought to mind, my Claiborne was a baby. This is a long time ago. And I just overheard, it wasn't like, I judged it or anything, but there was somebody that I think they might have been, looking back, having a little tiff with their kid, and they were like, we have to stay for communion, and the kid was like, why can't we go? I think they had a baseball game they were going to be like, or something. They're like, because that's what we do. And we come to church, we take communion, and we need to do that every Sunday. And I just kind of thought about that for me and my family. And do I want to send the message to my kids that's about going to church? And, or do I want to send the message that, church is important because of who you are in it, and how it helps us build community and build faith and all that kind of stuff. And so now, they get so tired of it. Every single Sunday we're there. Right before communion, I whisper to them, do you remember why we take communion? And, and it's age appropriate, like it's morphed over the years as Claiborne has gotten older and Steele's gotten more able to sit in the service. And Claiborne says, it reminds me of how much Christ has done for me. And then, Steele's like, it's a way of saying thank you for all that God has done and stuff. So and because that's what it's like, they're not, atrophying spiritually when we don't take communion, but it is possible that if they never think about themselves in relation to what God has done, that they could. Yeah. So, and it's not to say that parent's answer was wrong or what, who knows what was going on either, even what they believe, but that was just such a gift to me to know this is how I want to talk to my kids about it, about church in general.
It gave me goosebumps when you said that. Yeah. Like that was like, that's such a good story because it goes back to what you said too. And it's really, I'm from up north, and what I've noticed is up north, there's not very religious. And so I came down here, been here since 2009. got the privilege to be with my grandmother, and she would also drill that into me. It was like, listen, in the South, it's culturally unacceptable, at least where she was at, to not go to church.
Mm-hmm.
It's a checklist.
Yeah.
And if you lose sight that that's it, you have lost the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And right when you said that, I'm just like, it's like, you're not judging that other family, like you said, but at the same time, if we're not careful, we are the church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good to meet with other believers,
Yeah.
and it's good that we have structure and we go meet together and we worship. That's great, but those are a byproduct of why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And man, that is that's really good that you're doing that to your kids, because that will kill a lot of legalism.
But I think too, it's a product of, like you were asking, has the way I grew up influenced, how I am today. I think if I hadn't had those experiences, then it probably would be and no shame, no judgment. Like, you get your fulfillment and your nourishment where you do. And so,
Right.
just because that family takes communion as we're here, this is what we do, because of my experiences, I'm going to emphasize something else that maybe, they are emphasizing this and they're like, well, that you should be emphasizing that. And I'm like, well, this is because of my experiences, what's important to me.
Yeah. And the more and more I study biblical counseling, the more and more I realize, in talking to more people and obviously getting that realm of biblical counseling, because that's all they're doing is most of them are seeing Christians, and some of them open the floor to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what they say. They said 99% of the problems they run through is heavy legalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
like,
because it produces shame.
Yep.
Because when you equate what you're doing, this is back to the mind of an athlete, you equate what you're doing with your self-worth, we all fall short. We all screw up. We all
Yep.
So it's interesting like that.
Yeah.
And you focusing on shame, gonna have a very full caseload.
Yes, I will. I mean, I've already started just the conversations out there with clients and reading people's presuppositions of what they think about scripture and how they grew up, and just having conversation with them, just being a friend and talking about what I'm learning. And I remember I was talking to a woman who grew up heavy Catholic, and it was very heavy tradition. Like, that's why they're saved. And the amount of shame that she was carrying was just a lot. I mean, it was so much that she completely started neglecting herself. That's why she was here. And so just having just cool, honest conversations as a friend would, and then basically giving her exercise program, and then be like, when you walk in, like, you can rest. It's like, let's go talk back here a little bit. Let's just be friends.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about some of the stuff that you're going through, because exercise is just going to suppress it, at this stage.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. As soon as we started putting up like boundaries with God, she started shedding weight. It was the craziest. I was like, this is crazy. It had nothing to do with exercise.
Man, I mean, you want to read a book, The Body Keeps Score.
So you're the third person who's told me this.
Well, maybe you should.
I know. Well, it's a sign.
Well, because we have done ourselves such a disservice separating the body from the mind. And, so, it's just like when you're having a hard day, you're not going to be able to reach your max, So why?
Right.
And chronic, inflammation and autoimmune disorders and things like that. I mean, it's all connected.
I'm with you on that. Yep.
And I mean, chemically, like, simple look at cortisol, like, it's all connected. So.
Yep. There's this one psychologist, he tells his clients to, if they're struggling with a lot of anxiety, because he always uses medicine as the last form. He says, I'm not against it. Like, I had to take it before, like, give me a boost. That way I can do the work and actually focus on it, and then slowly wean off of it. And he said that he told his one thing that he does is people who are really anxious in the morning to eat just a heavier protein and fat diet, because it keeps cortisol and insulin levels more regulated. It says it does the same thing as medicine does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that was funny, because it's like, that is interesting. And so I started doing that a little bit, especially when I opened up the business and I was super nervous. And I mean, what that feels like.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh gosh, I'm waking up. I'm waking up in the middle of the night, like, is this going to work? And like you said, trying to fight that identity thing, because you still
Yeah.
You're still going to fall short. You're still going to think about things performance based, and you're going to have to snap out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that's one thing that I'm starting to learn is even food, like,
Right. That's part of our like nutritional makeup. So is it, anxiety or a nutritional deficit that we're not paying attention to
yes.
or,
Yeah.
like too much caffeine? I mean, not that I'm not totally guilty of that, but I do know,
That's so
like,
true.
I've noted, like, I've had a couple of days where I'm like, am I anxious or over caffeinated? Because as I've gotten older, my tolerance for caffeine surprisingly has lowered, which I don't understand why. But anyway, well, and
interesting.
actually somebody was talking about I forget the name of it, but it's a chemical in our body that helps us process caffeine. And so sometimes when we're older, that can drop. But anyway, neither here nor there. Is it like something I put in my body or I haven't put in my body? And depression, is it because I have a nutritional deficit that, I'm not able to create the precursors to serotonin or,
Yeah.
so.
No, that's so true.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would want to touch base on that we haven't talked about that you feel, I guess, convicted to talk about?
Was there something that we didn't talk about
I don't think so.
on the planet?
I'm trying to think. I don't think I looked
I love
through
my
all-
dog.
You're like, hey, trust me. He said, don't go on this hole. I will go down my dog.
Oh man, you got another hour to talk about dogs?
No, what kind of dog do you have?
I have two. One's
Okay.
an Australian Shepherd. This is the first time in my life I've not had German Shepherds. First time in my adult life. And so I got an Australian Shepherd thinking it would be a great therapy dog, not knowing much about the breed. That was a mistake. She quickly let me know that was not what she wanted to be when she grew up. Then the German Shepherd I had at the time passed away. And when you have two dogs, you always have to have two dogs.
That's right.
And so even whether you're ready or not. So I just, lucked up. Came up on my Facebook feed, a dog that was in a shelter in Baldwin, and it just looked like this big Muppet. And I was like, I guess I'm going to meet her. And she's been great, but we did a DNA test because I was, she does look exactly like Muppy from the Muppets, the
Really?
dog from the Muppets. It's hysterical. And so she turns out she's 50% Siberian Husky, 25% Golden Retriever, and 25% Poodle. So she's a Siberian Golden Doodle,
Oh my gosh.
which is wild.
How big is she?
She's like 55 pounds, so not huge, but she is being trained as a therapy dog. And
What?
yeah, because I mean, it's just fantastic to see what dogs do in therapy because we don't have another example on this planet, any sort of representation of unconditional love except dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too, is I had one of my friends. He had a family member go to like an addiction clinic, really expensive, somewhere up north. I mean, they had horses there. It's just
therapy, yeah.
it's crazy that just the amount of animals and the woods that they're in, of just the scenery of God's creation, of just being at the most authentic self.
Yep.
And the therapy that comes with that.
I know. Jennifer Main here in Oxford does, Jennifer Main, I've forgotten the name of her practice, but she does animal assisted therapy, which is different than just having a therapy dog. And that's amazing work just to see like the interaction and how, kids, for example, learn boundaries because you don't hug, like dogs aren't for hugging, dogs like petting. So are we thinking about what the dog wants? And so just stuff like that. And she's does such an amazing job with it. And, Scout, my dog, is like looking at her dog Jax like, you're impressive, but I want to play.
Now, talk a little bit about, and we'll close here, but talk a little bit about your practice. So where people can find you, and when do you open up?
So apparently Google, Josie Nicholson, and so I'm actually the only true sports psychologist in practice in Mississippi with, mental health and, in the performance. So, it's ARC, which is after Joan of Arc, whole nother podcast, but, ARC, Counseling and Sport Performance. And really it's not necessarily just about being an athlete, but the athlete mindset, or being a performer, because we're all performers in our work and our job, and so a lot of things. I've also certified as an ADHD clinician, so that is an area that, there's a higher population of in athletes for people with ADHD, and so that's been really helpful. And so Googleable, I have a website, and then I have a Facebook page and Instagram, and it's all the Facebook and Instagram is Arc Sport Performance. So yeah.
So when you told me you were going, I'm so fired up for you.
Yeah, me too.
I always empathize with people who started their own company, because I understand what that goes, what that feels like. And it takes a lot of courage, especially to leave such a promising job like Ole Miss and to take that risk, which tells me that the passion is at its highest.
Yeah.
Because that is really cool.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And and it's really been awesome to get back to what I love more, because I'd kind of gotten into an administrative things, and shocking, I'm not super passionate about budget meetings, and all that stuff is so necessary, right?
It's
so I'm able to work with teams, work with clients, work with, go give a talk to a travel ball squad. And it's cool to sit with even younger, cause I do, some Olympics, I do professional, but I also have some younger clients. And it's like, man, the number of times I thought in college, at Ole Miss, if somebody had gotten to you 3 years earlier, you would be unstoppable.
Wow.
And so I'm getting to them 3 years earlier, and it's exciting.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
So that's probably what drove your passion to go that direction. Is just like, oh, I want to work with younger.
Yeah, younger and
and just open your net more.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, younger, and the CEO that now has to give presentations that's nervous about it, or the person who loves playing the piano but can't get in front of people, and so
this is me going down a rabbit hole.
Woohoo.
Do you feel like working with college athletes versus pro level athletes, there is a differentiator mindset?
Well, collegiate athletes are in such a stage of development and self-discovery, and professional, and they're either trying to get to the next level or get the most out of what they have. And there is a mindset, like for golfers, for example, it's often a really tough transition to go from college, being very successful, to pro. First of all, because Q school is really hard, but then also because now I do have to focus on the outcome, because that's how I eat, And so how do you focus on your performance and the stakes are different? And so being able to navigate that, because you can still do it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes too, professional athletes are so steeped in their habit, and it's worked so well that it can be harder for them to change. And so a lot of times they're looking at their life stuff and which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Because you're going to be drive to be more performance oriented. Do you feel like when an athlete hits a tough spot, whether it's conflict with coach and another teammate, that's usually how they mostly, not just in performance, but handle everything in life? Do you feel like that's a trend, that's a pattern?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. It's very rare that it would be like, I only have this problem with taking feedback constructively and personally from my coach.
Is there any a practical example you can give just from your experience or talking to other coworkers that you have that you're like, I don't know about this?
Yeah, no, I think that is one.
Okay.
I can't, I'm not coachable. Well, oftentimes they're not open to ideas around them anyway. And they're going to struggle with that from professors. They're going to struggle with that from their boss. They're going to struggle with that with, friends, because they're not listening to what the friend needs from them versus what they want from them. And so I think, and also it's not like I only feel worthless when I miss a goal. No, they typically are trying to earn their worth everywhere.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that too, because I don't know if you ever heard of Dr. Henry Cloud. He wrote the book called
Yeah,
Boundaries.
boundaries. Yeah.
I love that book. It kind of like transformed how I view scripture. Just having better boundaries. But that's interesting too, because I notice if I don't talk to somebody, I don't know if you feel this the same way. If I don't talk to somebody who has a lot of experience working with just people, like athletes or just normal people that are not athletes, and they start to notice these patterns. When you bring up something to a person who doesn't have that experience, there's like, you're thinking too much into it. Like,
Yeah.
all of a sudden I was like, no, patterns are a huge indicator of why people act the way they do. There's this one book that I've read. I forget which one it is. Obviously I'm reading a lot of books for school, but one of them basically was like, you ever heard of that where it says, don't judge a book by its cover, like right when you see it initially? You should, because it tells you a lot about a person when you firstly meet, when you meet them, because that's when their anxiety is the highest.
Yeah.
It's uncertainty. Like it pulls their character traits out, and your reputation doesn't really show yet. Would you think that's true to an extent?
I think to an extent, it's when I think of that, because I have thought about that before, that when we first impressions are so important, and they kind of are the foundation for the way the relationship unfolds, right? And so it bothers me when people say, you could tell me anything, it's not going to change how I see you. And it's like, really? That sucks. Like, I want every piece of information to, have an impact. And so, so I think that there are different ways to say that. But when we meet somebody, there's impression management. They're putting out what they want you to see. And that's important information,
Yeah.
And so what are they telling me? And it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It is true in that moment. It is true. And so people aren't lying. They're not faking it. It's just a part of who they are. And this is what I feel safe showing you. And knowing it's not necessarily, there's always more deeper stuff in there. No, it's just, there's other aspects. There's a whole life of this person. And, it takes time to unfold, and you have to be safe for them to show those different aspects. Because here we've just met. Here's what I feel safe showing you. And so are you safe for me to show you other aspects?
Yep.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, we will end there.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that you came.
I'm so glad I came too.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was what?
I love this stuff.
Yeah, me too.
Probably one of my passions is sitting across from somebody, especially who has a lot of experience dealing with just people in general. And I just want to let you know that the impact that you have on Oxford is huge. It just is. I mean, even me coaching you, I gotten the privilege to coach you at Oxford. I mean, it was a joy. It was super fun. You're very relational. You're very grace driven, which is very refreshing to be around. But I've also talked to countless of athletes who just have such highly praises for you. And so I just want to do that to encourage you, because your business is going to thrive. I really firmly believe it. And the gifts that God has given you is going to be incredible.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And same.
Of course. Let me pray for us, and then I'll close us out.
All right.
Dear Father, thank you for the opportunity for me and Josie to do the podcast. And I just pray over her business and her family and her kids, and just the grace-driven mission that she's on to make a huge impact on just Oxford and just the nation in general. In Jesus' name, amen.